Hello and welcome to the third lecture of week 3 of the Open University's MOOC on genocide. Today we continue our discussion on the Armenian genocide, and the lecture will focus on the background of the 1915 genocide. We'll try to look for any premeditation and intent by the Young Turks government ruling the Ottoman Empire to commit real genocide against the Armenians, or rather other possible interpretations of this matter. Already in 1878, at the Congress in Berlin I mentioned in the last lecture, the Ottoman Empire is obligated to ensure the safety of the Armenians living in the Armenian highlands in the 6 historic Armenian districts within their territory. With your permission, I'll read a short passage from the protocol of that Berlin Agreement in 1878, which says, "The Supreme Gate," that's the title of the government, the seat of the Grand Vizier of the Ottoman Empire, the Supreme Gate is obligated to immediately execute the improvements and reforms demanded by local groups in provinces populated by Armenians and ensure their safety against the Circassians and Kurds. A periodical report on that relevant measures will be given to the powers that signed the Berlin Agreement, along with the Ottoman Empire, which will oversee its implementation. That brief text indicates ancient tension and hatred, in case you remember that term from the beginning of our course, between the Armenians, Circassians and Kurds. The latter, as we'll soon find out, eventually joined the murderers carrying out the Armenian genocide in 1915. During this period, we see the activity of the Armenian national movement, or to be accurate, the 2 different Armenian national movements. One is called the Bell and the other the Federation. Their activity gradually expands toward the 1890s. Between 1894 and 1896, we see 2 years of intense Armenian national efforts, including massive demonstrations and several cases of violence between Armenians and the authorities of the Ottoman Empire. These 2 years reach a peak in August 1896, when a group of people considered terrorists by the Ottoman Empire or Armenian freedom fighters, whichever way you'd rather see them, tried to assassinate the Ottoman Sultan. This failed attempt leads to a fierce and brutal retaliation by the Ottoman Empire. According to current estimates of Armenian organizations, this event that occurred in the late 19th century, between 1894 and 1896, claimed the lives of 300,000 Armenians slaughtered by the Ottoman Empire's security forces. This story doesn't result in any punitive measures against any of the Ottoman army's commanders or decision makers, and it seems to have paved the way for the future genocide 20 years later in 1915. Supposedly, it appears that one can hurt and murder hundreds of thousands of Armenians and not face any charge. After the Young Turk Revolution in 1908, there is a new hope among the Armenian national movement that things might change. But they are proven wrong pretty soon and realize these Young Turks are not going to be their saviors and grant them independence. Meanwhile, during this entire period, there are ties between the Armenians living in the Ottoman Empire and those living in the Russian Empire, which is now right across the border of the Armenian Highlands region. It's clear that many Armenians see the Russians as potential saviors who might capture the Armenian Highlands, the area where Armenians under Ottoman rule live. This hope sets the tone when World War I breaks out in 1914. Early on in the war, when the Russian army invades the Ottoman Empire through the Armenian Highlands, we see the main volatile condition that will soon lead to the massacre of the Armenian people in 1915. Let me briefly explain this story in more specific terms. As I mentioned, the Russian Empire was the Ottoman Empire's enemy throughout the 19th century. Even towards pre-World War I reorganization and the creation of the 2 main alliances in Europe, the pact between the German, Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires, who eventually fight the other alliance between England, France and Russia as part of the war plans of the parties in each camps. It's clear that the Ottoman Empire considers the Eastern Front with the Russians the main front. The same goes for the Russians, who eventually fight the Germans as well, but as far as they're concerned, the main objectives of the war are to be achieved against the Ottoman Empire. When the Tsarist Russian army crosses the border and finds itself fighting the army of the Ottoman Empire in the historic Armenian region, rumors reaching all the way to Istanbul suggest that many Armenians are helping the Russians, be it by providing lodging, food and so on, or by actively taking part in the elimination of Turks, Circassians and Kurds. In other words, Armenian Ottoman citizens are taking up arms and slaughtering their Muslim neighbors. At least that's the official story depicted by the Ottoman Empire and its Young Turks government when they explain why they must take action and prevent the Armenians from collaborating with the Russian army's invasion into the homeland's territory. When we ask whether these critical moments can be considered a kind of premeditation or exploitation of an opportunity by the Young Turks government to settle the score with the Armenians and commit genocide, we don't have a lot of smoky gun evidence we can use to point the finger and say, yes, indeed, they are. Perhaps the main thing one can point out in this context is an event that to this day is still used by Armenian lobbyists promoting the commemoration of the Armenian genocide. I'm referring to the night between April the 23rd and 24th, 1915. That night, Ottoman security forces in Istanbul arrest all the leaders and the elite class of the large, wealthy and powerful Armenian community of tens of thousands of people living in Istanbul. They arrest 234 leaders of that community, all of whom disappear. Most of them die in the coming months. We don't know whatever happened to some of them: clergymen, wealthy merchants, lawyers and intellectuals, the backbone of that strong and rich Armenian community living in Istanbul. When we ask ourselves in retrospect why this measure was taken, why the Ottoman Empire felt the need to expel the Armenian leadership, the answer seems quite clear. This is a supposed premeditated act with the aim of leaving the Armenians as a herd without a shepherd. You don't eliminate the leadership of an ethnic or religious group unless you want to confuse its people and leave them without support, leadership, or any kind of authority to turn to. And that is indeed what happened in this case. It's no coincidence that to this day, April 24th, is the day Armenians around the world mark the anniversary of the Armenian genocide, April 24th, 1915. A few weeks later, in June 1915, the Ottoman Empire issues a military warrant allowing the troops from now on to expel from their homes any non-Turkish population suspected of obstructing the war effort. That's what it said in that whitewashed military order. I say whitewashed because the main group targeted by this warrant was the Armenian population. Though there is another group called the Assyrians that lived across the Ottoman Empire and was also targeted by this warrant. Another relatively small and unique Christian group that expressed support of the Russian enemy was thought to be aiding and abetting the enemy, and it too suffered badly from the wrath of the Ottomans like the Armenians. But other than the Armenians, Assyrians, and isolated incidents of activity against the Greek Orthodox, we don't see much activity by the Ottoman Empire during World War I against other ethnic or religious groups. The Armenians are the main group that faces the wrath of the Ottomans and the only one facing a military warrant allowing massive expulsion or ethnic cleansing, if you want to use the term invented in the 1990s during the civil war in the former Yugoslavia. The Armenians are the main victims in this story. In the next lecture, we'll find out together what exactly happens during the implementation of that military warrant. In conclusion of this lecture, I'll repeat that we don't have any proof that the Armenian genocide was premeditated other than the disappearance of the Armenian leadership class on April 24, 1915. Another related factor is that during the outbreak of World War I, the Ottoman Empire enlists all draft-eligible Armenian male citizens of the empire. We're talking about a large number of troops, about 250,000 soldiers who joined the Ottoman Empire and disappeared pretty early in World War I. Some of them do fall on the front lines in battles against the Russian enemy, but some of them disappear in ways we have no way of documenting or discovering. Some researchers say this was an intentional, targeted elimination of the young Armenian male population that may have resisted the genocide. Therefore, they see the enlistment of those Armenian men as further proof of the premeditated nature of the genocide. Other researchers claim that it's unreasonable to assume the Ottoman Empire would have bothered to pursue this huge process of recruiting so many Armenian soldiers to the army, dressing them, arming them, teaching them how to fight, feeding and treating them, only to then eliminate this large group. The argument between these two schools of thought will probably never be solved. But this is another point researchers used to prove that this was a premeditated act of genocide. That's it for today. Thank you and see you later.